The morning sun cast long shadows across Windsor Castle's ancient stones when Kate Middleton first felt the strange sensation in her chest. She was standing in the rose garden, watching her children play on the perfectly manicured lawn when, suddenly, the world seemed to tilt sideways. Her hand instinctively moved to her throat, fingers pressing against the pulse point that felt oddly erratic. William was inside reviewing state papers, completely unaware that his wife was experiencing something that would soon send shockwaves through the entire British monarchy. The children's laughter echoed across the gardens as Kate steadied herself against a marble bench, trying to understand what was happening to her body. For weeks, she had been feeling unusually tired. Palace staff noticed she seemed more reserved during public appearances, though her radiant smile never wavered. The royal physicians had attributed it to stress from the increased workload following recent changes in the monarchy. After all, being the Princess of Wales came with enormous responsibilities that would exhaust anyone. But this morning felt different. As Kate watched a butterfly land delicately on a pink rose, she experienced a moment of clarity that would change everything. The fluttering in her chest wasn't just fatigue or anxiety. Something was genuinely wrong, and she could no longer ignore the signals her body had been sending. The irony wasn't lost on her that she, who had always been the picture of health and vitality, might be facing a serious medical challenge. Throughout her years in the royal family, Kate had become known for her active lifestyle, her love of sports, and her apparent boundless energy during royal engagements. She jogged regularly, played tennis, and could keep up with her 3 energetic children without breaking a sweat. Yet here she stood, feeling vulnerable in a way she had never experienced before. The woman who had gracefully handled the pressures of marrying into the most scrutinized family in the world was now confronting something far more personal and frightening than any public criticism or media attention. Inside the castle, William was discussing upcoming state visits with his private secretary, occasionally glancing out the window at his family. He noticed Kate sitting on the bench longer than usual, her posture slightly hunched in a way that was uncharacteristic of her typically perfect royal bearing. Something in her stillness caught his attention, but before he could investigate, his secretary was drawing him back to the pressing matters at hand. The children continued playing, blissfully unaware that their mother was grappling with fears that reached far beyond the palace walls. George kicked his football with particular enthusiasm, while Charlotte practiced her cartwheels on the soft grass. Louis toddled between his siblings, trying to keep up with their games. Their innocent joy provided a stark contrast to the worry beginning to build in Kate's mind. As the morning progressed, Kate made a decision that would require all the courage she had developed during her years as a working royal. She would need to see a doctor, not the palace physician who might feel obligated to report every detail to senior royal staff, but someone who could give her honest, straightforward medical advice without the complications of royal protocol. The challenge would be arranging such a visit without attracting attention. Every movement of senior royals was carefully coordinated and monitored. Even a simple trip to the local shops required security assessments and advanced planning. A medical consultation would be nearly impossible to keep private, especially if it involved anything more serious than a routine checkup. Kate's mind raced through the possibilities. She thought about her mother, Carol, who had always been her anchor during difficult times. Should she confide in her first before telling William? The Middleton family had always been remarkably close-knit, supporting each other through the extraordinary changes that came with Kate's marriage into royalty. But this felt different. This was about more than family dynamics or media pressure. This was about her health, her future, and potentially the stability of the monarchy itself. If something serious was wrong, it wouldn't just affect her personally. It would impact William, the children, and the institution they all served. The weight of that responsibility settled heavily on her shoulders as she finally stood up from the marble bench. The butterfly had long since flown away, leaving only the gentle fragrance of roses and the distant sound of her children's voices. She walked slowly toward the castle, each step feeling more significant than usual. William looked up as she entered his study, immediately noticing something different in her expression. After more than a decade together, he could read her moods and emotions with remarkable accuracy. The slight tension around her eyes, the way she held her shoulders, the almost imperceptible hesitation in her usual graceful movements, all of it told him that something was troubling his wife. "Everything all right?" he asked, setting aside his papers and giving her his full attention. It was a simple question, but Kate knew that her answer would set in motion a series of events that none of them could fully predict or control. She paused, at the threshold of his study, looking at the man who had been her partner through every challenge they had faced as a couple and as working royals. William's concern was evident in his blue eyes, the same eyes that had looked at her with such love on their wedding day at Westminster Abbey, when the whole world watched them promise to support each other through whatever lay ahead. Now, standing in the quiet elegance of his study with sunlight streaming through tall windows, Kate realized that those wedding vows were about to be tested in ways they had never imagined. The strength that had carried her through years of public scrutiny, family pressures, and royal duties would need to sustain her through whatever was coming next. Taking a deep breath, she stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind her, with a soft click that seemed to echo with the weight of unspoken words and uncharted territory ahead. The conversation that followed would later be remembered as one of the most difficult in their marriage. Kate found herself struggling to find the right words to express something she barely understood herself. How do you tell the future king of England that you might be seriously ill? How do you explain a fear that feels both irrational and terrifyingly real? William's initial reaction was exactly what she had expected. Immediate concern mixed with practical royal instincts. His first suggestion was to call the palace physician right away, to have a full medical team assembled within hours. But Kate shook her head, explaining that she needed something more private first, something that wouldn't immediately involve the entire royal medical establishment. The discussion revealed the unique challenges facing senior royals when dealing with personal health issues. Every medical consultation would eventually become part of official records. Every specialist consultation would require security clearances. Every test result could potentially affect not just their family, but the constitutional monarchy itself. William listened carefully as Kate described her symptoms, the fatigue that seemed to go beyond normal tiredness, the irregular heartbeat she had been experiencing, the general sense that something in her body wasn't functioning properly. As she spoke, he could see the vulnerability she rarely allowed herself to show, even to him. They decided together that Kate would see a private physician in London, someone recommended by trusted friends outside the royal circle. The appointment was arranged through a series of carefully orchestrated phone calls, with Kate using a private mobile phone that wasn't monitored by palace security systems. The logistics of getting Kate to London for a private medical appointment proved more complicated than either of them had anticipated. Every royal movement required coordination with protection officers, advanced security sweeps, and carefully planned routes. The idea of Kate simply driving herself to a doctor's office like any ordinary person was impossible. In the end, they developed a plan that involved Kate supposedly visiting a friend in Chelsea for lunch. The protection officers would maintain their usual discreet distance, allowing her to slip away for what they hoped would be an unnoticed medical consultation. The deception felt uncomfortable for both of them, as they had always tried to maintain honesty with their security team, but the need for privacy outweighed their discomfort. The drive to London was unusually quiet. Kate stared out the window at the familiar countryside, wondering if this might be one of the last times she would see it, without the weight of a serious medical diagnosis. She thought about her children, still so young and dependent on her presence in their lives. George was approaching an age where he was beginning to understand his future role in the monarchy, while Charlotte and Louis remained blissfully unaware of the responsibilities that awaited them. The private medical clinic in Harley Street was deliberately unremarkable from the outside, exactly the kind of place where someone might seek discreet medical care without attracting attention. Kate's protection officer remained in the car while she entered through a side entrance, her heart pounding with anxiety about what she might learn. Dr. Sarah Matthews, the physician they had chosen, was known for her discretion and expertise. She had treated several high-profile patients over the years, always maintaining absolute confidentiality. Her manner was professional but warm, immediately putting Kate at ease despite the unusual circumstances of their meeting. The initial examination was thorough but revealed nothing obviously alarming. Kate's heart rate was indeed irregular, but not dangerously so. Her blood pressure was slightly elevated, which could be attributed to stress. The doctor listened carefully to Kate's description of her symptoms, asking detailed questions about when they had started and how they had progressed. What concerned Dr. Matthews most was Kate's description of the fatigue. This wasn't the normal tiredness that might come from a busy schedule or the demands of royal life. Kate described feeling as though her energy was being drained away, leaving her struggling to maintain the enthusiasm and vitality that had always characterized her public appearances. Blood tests were arranged immediately, along with a series of more specialized examinations that would need to be conducted over the following days. Dr. Matthews explained that while Kate's symptoms could indicate several different conditions, many of them were entirely treatable. However, she also emphasized the importance of conducting thorough testing to rule out more serious possibilities. The conversation about potential diagnoses was both reassuring and terrifying. On one hand, many of the conditions that could cause Kate's symptoms were manageable with proper treatment. On the other hand, some of the possibilities were far more serious, potentially requiring major lifestyle changes or intensive medical intervention. As Kate prepared to leave the clinic, Dr. Matthews made one thing very clear. Whatever the test results revealed, Kate would need to be prepared for the possibility that her role as a working royal might need to be modified. The demanding schedule of public engagements, international travel, and ceremonial duties might not be sustainable depending on what they discovered. The drive back to Windsor was even quieter than the journey to London. Kate's mind was spinning, with questions and possibilities. She thought about all the future engagements already scheduled, state visits, charity patronages, school visits, and ceremonial events that were planned months in advance. The idea that she might not be able to fulfill these commitments felt like letting down not just the royal family, but all the organizations and people who counted on her support. William was waiting when she returned, his anxiety evident despite his attempts to appear calm. The children were having their afternoon lessons, giving Kate and William privacy to discuss what she had learned. As she recounted the appointment, William's expression grew increasingly serious, particularly when she mentioned the possibility of needing to reduce her royal duties. They both understood that any significant change in Kate's health would require careful management of public information. The British media and public had enormous affection for Kate, but they also had an insatiable appetite for information about the royal family's private lives. Any hint of health problems would trigger intense speculation and scrutiny that could be overwhelming for the entire family. That evening, as they tucked their children into bed, both Kate and William found themselves looking at their family life with new appreciation and anxiety. The simple routine of bedtime stories and goodnight kisses felt more precious when viewed through the lens of potential health challenges ahead. Kate lay awake long into the night, listening to William's steady breathing beside her and wondering what the test results might reveal. The uncertainty was perhaps the most difficult part, not knowing whether she was facing a minor health issue that could be easily resolved or something far more serious that could change everything about their lives. The next few days passed in a strange suspension of normalcy. Kate continued with her scheduled engagements, smiling and engaging with members of the public, while internally counting down the hours until her test results would be available. She visited a children's hospital in Manchester, opened a new community center in Birmingham, and attended a charity gala in London, all while feeling as though she were performing in a play where she didn't know how the story would end. William watched her carefully during these public appearances, noting subtle changes that only he would notice. The way she held herself during long periods of standing, the almost imperceptible pauses she took during conversations, the extra effort it seemed to require for her to maintain her characteristic warmth and enthusiasm. To everyone else, she appeared to be the same Kate they had always known and admired. But William could see the strain beneath the polished surface. The children sensed something different as well, though they couldn't articulate what had changed. George asked his mother one evening why she looked sad even when she was smiling. Charlotte noticed that her mother seemed to hug them more often and hold them a little longer than usual. Louis, too young to understand complex emotions, simply clung to Kate more during their playtime together. On Thursday morning, Dr. Matthews called with preliminary results from the blood tests. Most of the basic markers looked normal, which was encouraging, but there were a few irregularities that required further investigation. Kate would need to return to London for additional testing, including some procedures that would be more difficult to hide from the Palace medical team. The conversation with Dr. Matthews revealed the complexity of Kate's situation. While nothing in the initial tests suggested an immediately life-threatening condition, there were indications that something systemic was affecting her body. The doctor mentioned the possibility of an autoimmune condition, which could explain the fatigue and other symptoms Kate had been experiencing. Autoimmune conditions, Dr. Matthews explained, were often manageable but could be unpredictable. They might require long-term medication, lifestyle modifications, and careful monitoring. More concerning was the possibility that stress, something unavoidable in royal life, could trigger flare-ups that might be difficult to control. Kate found herself researching autoimmune conditions late into the night, reading medical websites and patient forums with a mixture of hope and dread. Some people with these conditions lived completely normal lives with minimal impact from their diagnosis. Others faced ongoing challenges that significantly affected their daily activities and energy levels. The most difficult aspect was the uncertainty about how such a diagnosis might affect her role as a working royal. The demanding schedule of public engagements, the stress of constant public scrutiny, and the physical demands of royal duties might all need to be reconsidered if her health became a primary concern. William suggested they begin making contingency plans, though neither of them wanted to acknowledge what that might mean. They discussed the possibility of reducing Kate's official engagements, perhaps focusing on fewer patronages but maintaining deeper involvement with each one. They talked about ways to modify their family life to reduce stress while still fulfilling their responsibilities to the monarchy. The conversation inevitably turned to the question of when and how to inform other members of the royal family. King Charles would need to be told, both as the sovereign and as William's father. The decision about whether to inform the broader royal household staff would depend largely on what the final diagnosis revealed and what kind of ongoing medical care Kate might need. On Friday, Kate returned to Dr. Matthews for additional testing. This time, the procedures were more invasive and time-consuming, requiring several hours at the clinic. The protection officer became suspicious about the length of Kate's supposed lunch engagement, but she managed to deflect his questions with a story about helping her friend with a personal crisis. The additional tests included cardiac monitoring, hormone level assessments, and imaging studies designed to look for any structural problems that might be causing Kate's symptoms. Dr. Matthews was particularly interested in Kate's thyroid function, as thyroid disorders could cause many of the symptoms Kate had been experiencing and were relatively common in women her age. While waiting for the test results, Kate found herself having a profound conversation with Dr. Matthews about the unique pressures facing senior royals. The doctor had treated other high-profile patients, but she acknowledged that the constant public attention and ceremonial responsibilities created stressors that most people never experienced. They discussed the possibility that Kate's symptoms might be partly related to the accumulated stress of more than a decade in the public eye. The transition from being a relatively private person to one of the most photographed women in the world had been gradual, but the psychological impact might have been building over time in ways that were only now manifesting physically. Dr. Matthews also raised the delicate subject of how any health condition might be perceived by the public and media. Royal health issues inevitably became matters of public concern, sometimes leading to speculation and rumors that could be more stressful than the medical condition itself. The doctor emphasized the importance of having a clear communication strategy, should that become necessary. The weekend passed slowly as Kate and William tried to maintain normal family routines while privately dealing with their anxiety about the pending test results. They took the children to their local church, participated in a family barbecue at Carol and Michael Middleton's home, and tried to focus on the simple pleasures of family life. But the uncertainty colored everything. Kate found herself memorizing moments with unusual intensity, the sound of Charlotte's laughter during a game of hide-and-seek, the concentration on George's face as he practiced his piano lessons, the way Louis wrapped his small arms around her neck during bedtime cuddles. She couldn't shake the feeling that their family life might be about to change in fundamental ways. William, meanwhile, was quietly making arrangements for various contingencies. He spoke discreetly with his private secretary about the possibility of adjusting their official schedule in the coming months. He also had preliminary conversations with Palace communications staff about strategies for managing any health-related announcements, should that become necessary. Both of them were acutely aware that their situation was fundamentally different from what most couples would face when dealing with potential health issues. Their personal crisis would inevitably become a matter of public interest, constitutional consideration, and media attention. The privacy that most people took for granted when dealing with medical concerns was not available to them. On Sunday evening, as they prepared for another week of uncertainty, Kate and William found themselves having one of the most honest conversations of their marriage about their fears, their hopes, and their commitment to supporting each other through whatever lay ahead. They talked about the possibility that Kate's health might require them to make significant changes to their public roles, and how they would protect their children from any negative impacts of such changes. Monday morning brought the call that Kate had been both anticipating and dreading. Dr. Matthews requested an immediate meeting to discuss the test results, her tone professional but serious enough to send Kate's heart racing. The appointment was scheduled for that afternoon, requiring another carefully orchestrated trip to London under the guise of a charity meeting. This time, William insisted on accompanying her, despite the additional complexity it would add to their security arrangements. As the future king, his movements required even more extensive planning than Kate's, but he was determined to be with his wife when she received whatever news awaited them. The drive to London was tense with unspoken fears. Both Kate and William tried to maintain normal conversation, discussing the children's upcoming school events and weekend plans, but their minds were clearly focused on the approaching appointment. Kate found herself studying William's profile as he gazed out the car window, wondering how the news they were about to receive might change their lives together. Dr. Matthews was waiting in her office when they arrived, having cleared her schedule to ensure complete privacy for their conversation. Her expression was serious but not alarming, giving them hope that whatever she had discovered wasn't immediately catastrophic. The diagnosis, when it came, was both a relief and a new source of concern. Kate had developed an autoimmune condition that was affecting her thyroid function and causing the symptoms she had been experiencing. It was manageable with proper treatment, but it would require ongoing medical monitoring and might have implications for her energy levels and overall health. Dr. Matthews explained that the condition was relatively common, particularly among women in their 30s and 40s, and that many people lived completely normal lives with proper medication and lifestyle adjustments. However, she also emphasized that stress could trigger flare-ups, and the demanding nature of royal life might need to be reconsidered. The conversation that followed was both medical and deeply personal. William asked detailed questions about treatment options, long-term prognosis, and potential complications. Kate wanted to know how the condition might affect her ability to have more children, her energy for royal duties, and her capacity to be the mother she wanted to be for George, Charlotte, and Louis. Dr. Matthews was thorough in her explanations, but she also acknowledged that much would depend on how Kate responded to treatment and how well they could manage the various stressors in her life. The good news was that the condition had been caught relatively early, before it had caused any permanent damage. The challenging news was that it would require significant changes to Kate's approach to her health and possibly her royal duties. The immediate treatment plan included medication to regulate her thyroid function, dietary modifications to support her immune system, and a recommendation to reduce stress wherever possible. Dr. Matthews also suggested that Kate work with a specialist who had experience treating high-profile patients who couldn't easily modify their work environments. As they prepared to leave the clinic, Dr. Matthews raised the inevitable question of disclosure. While Kate's medical information was strictly confidential, the practical realities of royal life meant that some people would need to be informed. Palace physicians would need to coordinate care, security staff might need to be aware of any medications or medical devices, and senior royal staff would need to understand if Kate's schedule required modification. The drive back to Windsor was filled with a different kind of tension than the morning journey had been. Now they had concrete information to process, decisions to make, and conversations to plan. The uncertainty had been replaced by the challenge of figuring out how to integrate this new reality into their complex lives. Kate found herself feeling oddly relieved to finally have an explanation for the symptoms that had been worrying her. The diagnosis was serious enough to justify her concerns, but not so catastrophic as to threaten her life or completely derail their family plans. However, she was also beginning to understand that managing an autoimmune condition while fulfilling royal duties would require careful balancing and possibly some difficult choices. William's immediate concern was protecting Kate from additional stress while they figured out how to manage her condition. He suggested they begin by informing his father, King Charles, who would need to know both for personal reasons and because any reduction in Kate's official duties would affect the overall royal schedule. That evening, they had a conference call with King Charles, explaining Kate's diagnosis and discussing the potential implications for her royal role. Charles's response was immediately supportive, emphasizing that Kate's health had to be the primary priority and that the family would adapt their schedules as necessary to accommodate any limitations she might face. The conversation with Charles also touched on the delicate matter of public disclosure. While Kate's medical details would remain private, any significant changes to her official schedule would likely generate media speculation. They would need to develop a communication strategy that protected Kate's privacy while satisfying public interest in a way that didn't fuel harmful rumors or speculation. The decision was made to begin gradually reducing Kate's official commitments over the following months, allowing her body time to respond to treatment while giving the palace communications team opportunity to manage any media questions that might arise. The changes would be introduced slowly enough to avoid triggering speculation about major health problems, but significantly enough to reduce the stress that might be complicating Kate's condition. That night, Kate and William had their most difficult conversation yet about what this diagnosis might mean for their family's future. They talked about the possibility that Kate might never again be able to maintain the intense schedule of public engagements she had carried before her diagnosis. They discussed how to explain any changes to their children without causing them unnecessary worry. Most importantly, they reaffirmed their commitment to supporting each other through this challenge, just as they had supported each other through every other difficulty they had faced since their engagement. William made it clear that he would rather modify every aspect of their royal duties than see Kate compromise her health for the sake of public expectations. Kate found herself thinking about all the people who depended on her involvement in various charities and causes. The children's hospital she visited regularly, the mental health organization she championed, the sports programs she supported. All of these would be affected if she had to reduce her activities significantly. But she also realized that she might be able to have more impact through fewer, more focused commitments rather than trying to maintain involvement in dozens of different organizations. Quality over quantity might not only be better for her health, but might also allow her to make more meaningful contributions to the causes she cared about most. As they prepared for bed, both Kate and William understood that their lives had entered a new phase. The carefree confidence of their earlier years together was giving way to a more mature understanding of life's uncertainties and the importance of health and family above all other considerations. They were facing their first major health challenge as a couple, and it would test their partnership in ways they had never anticipated. The weeks that followed Kate's diagnosis brought a period of careful adjustment that required delicate balancing between her health needs and public expectations. The medication began working relatively quickly, with Kate noticing improvements in her energy levels within the first month. However, the psychological adjustment to living with a chronic condition proved more challenging than the physical symptoms had been. Kate found herself approaching each day with a new awareness of her body's signals, something she had never needed to do before. The woman who had once thrown herself enthusiastically into every royal engagement now had to pace herself carefully, ensuring she had adequate rest between commitments and avoiding situations that might trigger stress-related flare-ups. The gradual reduction in her official schedule was implemented so skillfully by the palace communications team that most media outlets didn't initially notice the change. Kate's appearances became less frequent but more impactful, with longer stays at each event and deeper engagement with the people and causes she encountered. In many ways, this approach proved more effective than her previous whirlwind schedule had been. William watched this transition with a mixture of admiration and concern. He could see that Kate was adapting to her new circumstances with the same grace and determination she had brought to every challenge in their marriage. But he also recognized the internal struggle she faced in accepting limitations for the first time in her adult life. The children sensed the changes in their family dynamics, though Kate and William worked hard to ensure that the adjustments enhanced rather than disrupted their home life. Kate's reduced travel schedule meant more time for school pickups, homework help, and family dinners. The slower pace at home became a welcome change for all of them, even as it represented a significant shift from their previous lifestyle. Dr. Matthews continued to monitor Kate's progress closely, adjusting medications and treatment protocols based on her response. The specialist was encouraged by Kate's improvement, but emphasized the importance of maintaining the lifestyle modifications they had implemented. The autoimmune condition would be a lifelong consideration, requiring ongoing vigilance and self-care. 3 months after her diagnosis, Kate faced her first major test when she was scheduled to accompany William on a state visit to Australia. The trip would involve multiple time zones, a demanding schedule of official engagements, and the kind of intense media attention that could be physically and emotionally draining, even for someone in perfect health. Dr. Matthews was initially reluctant to approve such an ambitious trip so soon after Kate's diagnosis. However, after extensive consultations and careful planning, she agreed that the visit could proceed with significant modifications to the usual protocol. Kate's schedule would be reduced by nearly half compared to previous overseas tours, with built-in rest periods and medical support discreetly arranged at each stop. The Australia trip became a turning point for Kate's approach to her royal role. Rather than trying to maintain her previous pace while hiding her health challenges, she began to develop a more sustainable way of fulfilling her duties. The Australian public and media responded positively to what they perceived as Kate's increased warmth and availability during interactions, not realizing that her more relaxed approach was actually the result of careful health management. William S. support during the trip was evident to everyone around them. He quietly took on additional responsibilities, ensured Kate had adequate rest time, and became even more protective of their private moments together. The partnership they had always shared in their public roles became more pronounced as they navigated this new dynamic. The success of the Australia visit gave Kate confidence that she could continue fulfilling her royal duties while managing her health condition. However, it also confirmed that her approach to royal life would need to be permanently different from what it had been before her diagnosis. The realization was both liberating and somewhat melancholy, as it meant definitively closing the door on a more carefree period of her life. Back in Britain, Kate began working with a new private secretary who specialized in managing the schedules of high-profile individuals with health considerations. Together, they developed systems for ensuring that Kate's commitments were spaced appropriately, that travel was minimized during certain times of the year, and that backup plans were always available if her condition required sudden schedule changes. The palace medical team was gradually brought into Kate's care, though Dr. Matthews remained her primary physician. The coordination between private and official medical care required careful management to ensure continuity of treatment while maintaining the confidentiality that Kate needed to feel comfortable with her ongoing care. As autumn approached, Kate reflected on how much her life had changed since that morning in the rose garden, when she first felt the strange sensation in her chest. The fear and uncertainty of those early weeks had given way to a new understanding of herself and her capabilities. She had learned to work with her body's needs rather than against them, and had discovered that this approach actually made her more effective in many ways. The relationship between Kate and William had deepened through this experience. They had always been close partners, But managing a health challenge together had revealed new dimensions of their mutual support and commitment. William's unwavering support during Kate's most vulnerable moments had strengthened their bond in ways that their earlier, easier years together had never required. Kate's relationship with her children had also evolved. She was more present for the daily details of their lives, more patient with their questions and concerns, and more intentional about creating meaningful family experiences. The forced slowing of her pace had given her opportunities to be the kind of hands-on mother she had always wanted to be, but had sometimes struggled to prioritize amid royal obligations. The public gradually began to notice changes in Kate's approach to her role, though few understood the reasons behind them. Media coverage began emphasizing the quality of her engagements rather than the quantity, with journalists noting her increased engagement with individual people and causes. Some observers speculated that she was evolving into a more mature and focused royal, not realizing that health considerations were driving much of this transformation. As the first year with her diagnosis drew to a close, Kate found herself feeling more settled and confident than she had since the symptoms first appeared. The condition remained a daily consideration, but it had become a manageable part of her life rather than a source of constant anxiety. She had learned to listen to her body, to pace herself appropriately, and to find new ways of fulfilling her responsibilities that were actually more sustainable and fulfilling than her previous approach had been. 2 years after her diagnosis, Kate stood once again in the rose garden at Windsor Castle. But everything about the moment felt different from that frightening morning when her health crisis had begun. The same butterflies danced among the flowers. The same ancient stones formed the castle walls. But Kate herself had been transformed by her journey through illness, treatment, and recovery. The woman who now watched her children play on the lawn was more self-aware, more intentional in her choices, and paradoxically more confident than she had been before her health scare. She had learned to trust her body's signals, to prioritize her well-being without guilt, and to find new ways of serving the monarchy that were both more sustainable and more meaningful. The autoimmune condition remained a daily consideration, but it had taught Kate valuable lessons about resilience, adaptation, and the importance of living authentically. Her medication had stabilized her symptoms, and the lifestyle modifications she had implemented had become natural parts of her routine. More importantly, she had developed a different relationship with stress and public pressure that served her well in all aspects of her life. William approached across the garden, holding a newspaper that contained a feature article about Kate's new approach to royal duties. The journalist had noticed the changes in her public appearances over the past 2 years, the longer conversations with individuals, the deeper engagement with causes, the quality over quantity approach to her commitments, and had praised her evolution as a working royal. The article didn't mention Kate's health condition, which remained known only to her immediate family and closest advisors, but it accurately described the positive impact of her modified approach to royal life. She was visiting fewer organizations but spending more meaningful time with each one. She was traveling less frequently, but making each trip count for more. She was speaking publicly less often but with greater impact when she did choose to share her thoughts. Kate smiled as she read the journalist's observations, recognizing how her private health journey had inadvertently led to improvements in her public role that she might never have discovered otherwise. The necessity of managing her condition had forced her to become more strategic about her choices, more focused in her commitments, and more authentic in her interactions. The children had grown during these 2 years, and they had adapted to their mother's new rhythms with the flexibility that children possess. George, now approaching his teenage years, had developed a deeper appreciation for family time and had learned to value the quality of attention his mother gave him rather than simply the quantity of time they spent together. Charlotte had absorbed her mother's approach to managing challenges with grace and determination, qualities that were already evident in how she handled her own school and social pressures. Louis, still young enough to accept change as natural, simply enjoyed having a mother who was more present and less hurried in their daily interactions. The family dynamics had settled into new patterns that everyone found more satisfying. Evening meals together had become more frequent and less rushed. Weekend activities were planned with more care, focusing on experiences that brought the family closer together rather than simply filling time with activities. Kate's relationship with her own parents had also deepened during this period. Carol and Michael Middleton had been a constant source of support throughout Kate's health journey, and the experience had reinforced the close bonds that had always characterized the Middleton family. Kate found herself drawing on the practical wisdom and emotional stability that her parents had always provided, appreciating their presence in new ways. The broader royal family had also adapted to Kate's modified approach to her duties. King Dor. Charles had been consistently supportive, often remarking privately that Kate's more focused approach to royal engagements was setting a positive example for how the modern monarchy might evolve. The other working royals had naturally absorbed some of Kate's former commitments, but the overall effect had been to make the royal family's public work more targeted and effective. The palace staff had learned to work with Kate's new rhythms and requirements, developing systems that supported her health needs while maintaining the high standards expected of royal engagements. Her private secretary had become expert at crafting schedules that maximized impact while minimizing stress, creating a template that other members of the royal family were beginning to adopt. Dr. Matthews continued to monitor Kate's condition, but their appointments had become routine checkups rather than urgent consultations. The doctor often remarked that Kate was one of her most successful patients in terms of adapting her lifestyle to support her health while continuing to meet professional demands. Kate had become an example of how autoimmune conditions could be managed effectively without sacrificing meaningful work or family life. The most significant change, however, was in Kate's own sense of purpose and identity. Before her diagnosis, she had sometimes felt as though she were simply responding to expectations and demands placed upon her by others. The health crisis had forced her to become more intentional about her choices, more authentic in her commitments, and more confident in setting boundaries that protected both her well-being and her effectiveness. She had discovered that saying no to some requests actually made her yes responses more meaningful. The organizations and causes that continued to receive her support benefited from her increased focus and deeper engagement. The public appearances she did make were more memorable and impactful because she approached them with greater energy and genuine enthusiasm. Kate's advocacy work had also evolved to include subtle but important messages about health, wellness, and the importance of self-care. While she never spoke directly about her own condition, her public comments increasingly emphasized the need for people to listen to their bodies, prioritize their mental and physical health, and seek appropriate medical care when needed. The ripple effects of these messages were particularly meaningful to women who faced similar challenges in balancing demanding careers with health considerations. Kate's example of adapting her professional responsibilities to support her well-being, while never explicitly stated, provided a powerful model for others who might be struggling with similar decisions. As the second anniversary of her diagnosis approached, Kate reflected on how profoundly the experience had changed her understanding of strength, success, and service. She had learned that true resilience wasn't about pushing through difficulties regardless of personal cost, but about finding sustainable ways to continue contributing meaningfully to the world while taking care of herself. The fear that had initially accompanied her diagnosis had been replaced by a deep sense of gratitude for what the experience had taught her. She was grateful for her improved health, certainly, but also for the personal growth that had come from learning to live with uncertainty and to adapt to changing circumstances. William often commented that he preferred this version of Kate, more grounded, more intentional, more at peace with herself and their life together. Their marriage had been tested by the health crisis, but it had emerged stronger and more mature. They had learned to support each other through genuine difficulty, and that experience had prepared them for whatever challenges might lie ahead. Looking toward the future, Kate felt more optimistic and confident than she had in years. She understood her body better, managed her responsibilities more effectively, and approached each day with a clearer sense of priorities. The autoimmune condition would always be part of her life, but it had become a teacher rather than simply a burden. The kingdom, meanwhile, continued to hold its breath in the best possible way, not from fear or concern, but from appreciation for a princess who had learned to balance duty with wisdom, service with self-care, and public responsibility with personal authenticity. Kate's journey had shown that even the most visible public figures could face health challenges, adapt to new circumstances, and emerge stronger and more effective than before. As she walked back toward the castle that afternoon, Kate felt the steady, strong rhythm of her heart, no longer irregular with anxiety or illness, but beating with the confidence of someone who had faced uncertainty and discovered her own resilience. The crown might not have stopped in mid-pulse, but Kate had learned to listen to her own heartbeat and to honor what it told her about living a life that was both meaningful and sustainable.